Effective immediately, you're terminated. Enjoy your vacation. The text message burned on my screen as Santorini's sunrise painted the horizon pink. Day 2 of my honeymoon, and my boss's daughter had decided I was disposable. Everything okay? My husband lowered his coffee cup, studying my face. I smiled. Perfectly fine. For 3 years, I'd revolutionized how the company handled its high-stress projects. Not through rigid systems, but through what I called emotional forecasting, anticipating how pressure affected different team members and adjusting accordingly. Under my approach, burnout vanished, and delivery success jumped 94%. The founder championed my methods. Her daughter, who arrived 2 months ago with her management certificate, called it coddling. "We need tougher teams, not hand-holding," she announced during our first meeting, barely glancing up from her expensive watch. Real business isn't about feelings. What she couldn't comprehend, my approach wasn't soft. It was strategically human. I prevented problems before they manifested by understanding what made people thrive under pressure. I watched her systematic campaign against me unfold, my team meetings labeled excessive, my input increasingly ignored, my success metrics reframed as coincidental. So before my wedding, I made one adjustment, not sabotage, that would harm people I respected. I simply stopped my daily practice of quiet intervention, those tiny moments where I prevented emotional wildfires before they sparked. I set my phone to silent and joined my husband by the infinity pool. 6 hours later, I discovered 47 missed calls from the founder herself. When I finally answered, her voice trembled with urgency. "What's happening? 3 major project teams have completely unraveled. Nobody's communicating. 2 team leads threatened to quit mid-delivery. I'm no longer employed there," I replied calmly. "My daughter, she didn't consult me. She doesn't understand what you actually do here." Before I continue, if you're finding this story valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything, and it helps others find content like this. If you've ever been underestimated at work, drop a comment. I read every single one and would love to hear your experiences. Now, back to what happened next. My name is Astrid. I'm not what you'd picture when thinking of a corporate power player. I stand 5'3" with curly hair. I never learned to tame properly, and a fondness for vintage brooches that clash spectacularly with modern business attire. My colleagues used to joke that I looked more like an eccentric art teacher than someone who handled million-dollar client projects. What they didn't understand was my mind, specifically, how I processed human dynamics. Since childhood, I've mapped emotional patterns the way some people see mathematical equations. I notice when someone's tone shifts by the slightest degree, when someone's shoulder tension indicates brewing frustration, when team enthusiasm is genuine versus performative. My first job after college was at a small tech startup where I was hired as a project coordinator. Within months, I noticed something peculiar. Projects succeeded or failed, not based on technical merit, but on human friction points that nobody addressed. A developer who felt unappreciated would subtly delay deliverables. A client service representative who felt disrespected in meetings would gradually communicate less critical information. I began making tiny interventions. A 2-minute conversation here, a reconfigured meeting structure there. Soon, our completion rates soared. The founder, Madeline, noticed immediately. A brilliant innovator in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair and fierce intelligence. She called me into her office. "Whatever you're doing, I want you to do more of it. Build it into something we can replicate." That began my real career. I developed what I called pressure point prevention, a methodology for maintaining peak team performance during high-stress projects. It wasn't about making people happy. It was about removing the invisible barriers that prevented exceptional work. For 3 years, Madeline gave me freedom to refine this approach. Our company tripled in size. Our client retention hit 96%. We became known for delivering under impossible deadlines without burning out our teams. Then Isabella arrived. Madeline's daughter had spent 5 years at a prestigious consulting firm before deciding to join what she called the family business. At 32, Isabella was polished, Harvard-educated, and utterly convinced that corporate success came from rigid discipline, not human understanding. Mom's generation believes in this touchy-feely stuff, she told me during our first one-on-one. her manicured nails tapping impatiently on her leather portfolio. But I've studied best practices at global firms. I'm here to modernize our approach. I tried explaining that my system wasn't about feelings. It was about strategic human performance optimization. She cut me off. Let's move forward with metrics we can actually measure. The conflict between us was immediate but understated. Isabella never directly attacked my work. She simply began undermining it through 1,000 paper cuts. My weekly emotion mapping sessions with project teams, unnecessary meeting bloat. My custom workflow adjustments for different personality types, inconsistent standards. My conflict prevention discussions, time that could be spent on deliverables. Madeline noticed our tension but seemed reluctant to intervene. She needs to find her place here. Give her time to understand our culture. What Madeline didn't realize was how quickly Isabella was consolidating power. She built alliances with the board by presenting my emotional intelligence work as outdated compared to her data-driven approach. She hired 3 former colleagues who shared her philosophy. She gradually took over client relationships, positioning herself as the true future of the company. 2 weeks before my wedding, Isabella called an all-hands meeting. I wasn't invited to. A sympathetic colleague texted me afterward. She announced a new project management framework that's replacing yours, said it was fully supported by leadership. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by half-packed honeymoon luggage, and made a difficult choice. I wouldn't fight back in any way that harmed the company or my colleagues, but I also wouldn't protect a system that was actively rejecting me. So I stopped. Not dramatically, not completely, just enough. I stopped sending my morning pulse check messages that prevented team conflicts before they erupted. I stopped my practice of personally connecting with struggling team members before their performance declined. I stopped my subtle meeting interventions that kept projects from derailing during tense client discussions. In essence, I just did the job Isabella thought I had, routine project management, without the unnecessary human element. As I stared at the termination text on my honeymoon, something unexpected happened. Instead of anger or hurt, I felt a strange sense of relief. The constant battle to validate my approach had exhausted me. "What are you thinking?" my husband asked, watching me place the phone face down on the infinity pool's edge. I was about to answer when the hotel phone rang. The concierge informed me that my office was trying urgently to reach me. I declined the call. "Nothing important," I told my husband, taking his hand. "Let's enjoy breakfast." Little did I know that back home, the company was experiencing what would later be called the collapse. Throughout that day in Santorini, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Colleagues, board members, even clients somehow found my personal number. I silenced them all and focused on the breathtaking views of the caldera with my new husband. "I've never seen you ignore work before," Jason said, genuine concern in his voice as we explored whitewashed streets. "Should I be worried? For once in my life, I'm prioritizing us," I replied, lacing my fingers through his. "Whatever's happening will still be there when we return." What was happening, as I would later learn, was nothing short of catastrophic. The day after I was fired, 3 major client projects simultaneously reached critical stress points. Under normal circumstances, I would have recognized the warning signs weeks earlier: the slight tension in voice messages, the delayed responses to key questions, the subtle defensiveness in status updates. In each case, I would have made nearly invisible adjustments, reassigning certain team members, restructuring communication channels, or having private conversations with key stakeholders. None of these interventions appeared in any process document. They existed solely in my understanding of human dynamics. Without these interventions, natural tensions escalated into full-blown crises. On the McIntyre account, 2 team leads with conflicting work styles had a shouting match during a client presentation. The client, witnessing this breakdown, immediately placed their $3 million project on hold. The Rosewood initiative spiraled when a detail-oriented analyst clashed with a big-picture strategist. Their dispute spilled into client communications, creating confusion that led the client to question the entire project foundation. And the Wheeler launch, the company's most prestigious project, derailed when team exhaustion led to a critical error in the final deliverable, something I had always prevented by rotating high-pressure tasks among team members based on their stress resilience patterns. By nightfall of the first day, Madeline had called an emergency board meeting. By the second day, 2 clients had threatened to terminate their contracts. By the third day, several key team members had started updating their resumes. Isabella, who had positioned herself as the solution to my supposedly soft approach, found herself completely overwhelmed. Her rigid systems offered no flexibility to address the human elements unraveling before her. On my 4th day in Santorini, I finally answered Madeline's call. Astrid, I don't understand what's happening. Her voice cracked with exhaustion. Everything was working perfectly, and now it's like the entire organization forgot how to function. I sat on our private terrace, watching the sunset paint the sea gold. Nothing has changed, except one element. You, she said quietly. Not exactly, I corrected her. Your daughter removed the invisible infrastructure I built. She thought she was eliminating unnecessary coddling. She was actually removing the foundation everything else rested on. The line went silent for several moments. I need you back, Madeline finally said. Name your terms. I'm on my honeymoon, I reminded her. Isabella was wrong to terminate you. The board has already overturned her decision. Please, Astrid, we're losing clients. I closed my eyes, feeling the warm Aegean breeze on my skin. I'll think about it. After hanging up, I explained everything to Jason. He listened without interrupting, then asked the question that would change everything. Do you want to go back to a place that didn't value you until everything fell apart? His question struck me with unexpected force. For 3 years, I'd poured my heart into building something extraordinary, only to have it dismissed as unnecessary by someone who couldn't understand it. Maybe this is your chance to build something of your own, Jason continued. Something where your name is on the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on our balcony until dawn, thinking not about revenge, but about possibility. What if I could create a place where my approach was the foundation, not an afterthought? By morning, I had made my decision. When Madeline called again, I answered with newfound clarity. I'm not coming back as an employee. What are you saying? Alarm edged her voice. I'm offering you a choice. Your company can become my first client, or your competitors can. The silence on the line told me she understood the significance of what I was proposing. You're starting your own consulting practice. It wasn't a question. I've spent years developing a methodology that works. Isabella didn't value it because she couldn't see it, but you can see the results of its absence. What happened next surprised me. Instead of negotiation or resistance, Madeline laughed, a genuine, relieved sound I hadn't expected. You know what's ironic, Astrid? I've been waiting for you to realize your true value for years. I just didn't expect it would take my daughter's short-sightedness to make it happen. We spent the next hour outlining a consulting agreement that would allow me to stabilize their immediate crisis while establishing my own company. I would train their teams in my methodology but maintain ownership of the approach. They would become a case study for my future clients. When we finally ended the call, Jason was watching me with pride. So you're a founder now? Apparently, I said, still processing this unexpected turn. What will you call your company? I thought for a moment about the essence of what I'd built, the ability to see beneath surface tensions, to the human currents driving organizational success or failure. Undercurrent, I decided, because what truly matters in business is what flows beneath the visible surface. We spent the remainder of our honeymoon alternating between romantic moments and business planning. I drafted the framework for my methodology, created training modules, and outlined how I would structure client engagements. When we returned home, Madeline had arranged an all-hands meeting. As I walked into the familiar conference room, the tension was palpable. Isabella sat rigidly beside her mother, her expression unreadable. Madeline stood to address the room. Most of you have experienced the challenges of the past 2 weeks. Today, we're announcing a strategic partnership that will address these issues and strengthen our approach going forward. As she introduced me as the founder of Undercurrent Consulting, Isabella's face flushed red. When the applause died down, Madeline continued with something unexpected. My daughter Isabella will be working closely with Astrid to integrate these methodologies across all our teams. Isabella's head snapped toward her mother, genuine shock breaking through her composed facade. I hadn't requested this arrangement, but immediately recognized Madeline's strategy. This wasn't punishment, it was education. Isabella needed to understand what I had built before she could lead effectively. After the meeting, Isabella cornered me in the hallway. I want to be clear, I don't need a babysitter. Good, I replied calmly. Because I'm not here to babysit. I'm here to reveal an invisible architecture you've been trying to dismantle without seeing. Her eyes narrowed. My methods are proven. In stable environments, perhaps, but high-pressure delivery requires understanding human dynamics at a level your frameworks don't address. That's just measurable, I interrupted. The past 2 weeks have measured exactly what happens when those dynamics are ignored. Something shifted in her expression. Not surrender, but perhaps the first crack in her certainty. 1 month, she said finally. I'll give your approach 1 month to prove itself. What Isabella didn't realize was that 1 month was more than enough time to demonstrate the power of what I'd built. But the real revelation would come from what I discovered during my first week back. Information that would transform not just my relationship with Isabella, but the entire future of the company. Because hidden in the project files Isabella had taken over was evidence of something no one had noticed, something that explained her aggressive campaign against me and revealed a vulnerability in the company's foundation that even Madeline didn't suspect. I waited until late evening to begin reviewing the project files. The office stood empty, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the HVAC system. For hours, I combed through reports, communications, and planning documents. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Timelines, resource allocations, client requirements, but something felt off. Isabella had reorganized everything according to her preferred system, yet certain gaps emerged in the narrative flow. Near midnight, I discovered the first anomaly, a client meeting recap that referenced discussions not documented anywhere else. Following this thread led me to a hidden folder buried within a seemingly unrelated archive. What I found made my heart race. Isabella hadn't come to the company simply to gain experience in the family business. She'd been sent to investigate potential acquisition targets, and our company topped the list. Her previous employer, a massive corporate giant known for consuming smaller innovators, had tasked her with assessing our methodology, client relationships, and overall value. The termination wasn't personal, it was strategic. With me gone, the company's unique advantage would disappear, dropping its market value significantly. Their acquisition plan was coldly brilliant. Buy low after manufactured instability, absorb our client base, and eliminate a rising competitor. Isabella wasn't just Madeline's daughter. She was the perfect Trojan horse, someone Madeline would never suspect of corporate espionage. I sat back, stunned by the implications. My first instinct was to rush to Madeline with this revelation, but something held me back. The evidence, while compelling, remained circumstantial. Moving too quickly could destroy both the mother-daughter relationship and any chance of addressing the threat strategically. Instead, I decided to use my own methodology, understanding human pressure points, to create change. The next morning, I arrived early to prepare for my first official consulting session with Isabella. She entered precisely on time, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit that screamed corporate armor. "Let's get this over with," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Today," I began, ignoring her tone, "we're going to try something different. I'm going to show you how I analyze team dynamics by having you participate in the process directly." Skepticism flashed across her face, but she nodded curtly. I pulled up the Wheeler project, our most troubled account and one Isabella had been particularly interested in, according to the hidden files. "This client has unique pressure sensitivities," I explained. "Their leadership responds poorly to certain communication styles. Tell me, what approach would you recommend?" She launched into a textbook answer about clear deliverables and accountability metrics. "Interesting," I said, letting silence hang afterward. The lack of affirmation discomforted her, exactly as I'd intended. "What?" she finally asked. "I notice you focus exclusively on process, not on the people implementing it. Because process is replicable and doesn't depend on emotional variables," she replied. "Let's test that theory," I suggested. "I'll show you 2 approaches with this client, one process-focused and one accounting for the human element." For the next hour, I walked her through actual case studies from the Wheeler account, demonstrating how understanding the client's anxiety around innovation had been key to our success. Their COO presents as confident but actually fears being blindsided, I explained. When we adjusted our communication to address this hidden concern, project approval time decreased by 67%. Isabella's expression remained neutral, but I noticed her taking unusually detailed notes. "This is just basic psychology," she argued, though with less conviction than before. "It's applied behavioral science in a business context," I corrected. "And it's quantifiable. The approach you dismissed as touchy-feely saved this project 230 billable hours last quarter alone." By session's end, Isabella's defensive posture had subtly shifted. She wasn't convinced, but something had penetrated her certainty. "Same time tomorrow?" I asked pleasantly. She nodded, gathering her materials. As she reached the door, she paused. "My previous firm would consider this approach inefficient." "And how would they measure that efficiency?" I asked. The question hung between us. We both knew the answer: by how quickly they could strip a company's assets after acquisition. "Different metrics," she finally replied before leaving. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued these sessions while quietly gathering more evidence about the acquisition plan. Each day, I exposed Isabella to another facet of my methodology, always demonstrating measurable results. Simultaneously, I began implementing what I called organizational immunology, strengthening the company's structure against external threats without revealing I knew about them. I established proprietary documentation for our methodology, helped Madeline secure additional patents, and restructured client agreements to include loyalty incentives that would make acquisition less attractive. By the third week, Isabella started asking genuine questions during our sessions. The turning point came when a client crisis erupted during our meeting, the perfect opportunity to demonstrate my approach in real time. The Wheeler client was threatening to pull out after receiving what they perceived as dismissive feedback from one of our team leads. "Watch," I said, pulling up the communication chain. I quickly identified the escalation pattern, how a simple misinterpretation had triggered the client's insecurity about being respected. "Normally, you'd send a carefully worded apology and offer concessions," I noted. "Instead, we're going to address the underlying concern." I drafted a response acknowledging their expertise first before addressing the project details. Then had our team lead call the client directly with a specific question that demonstrated we valued their insight. "This seems manipulative," Isabella observed. "It's actually the opposite," I countered. "Manipulation ignores true needs for superficial compliance. This approach recognizes and addresses the actual human concern beneath the business issue." Within an hour, the crisis had resolved. The client not only stayed but approved the next project phase ahead of schedule. Isabella sat back, visibly processing what she'd witnessed. "This is what happened when you were gone, isn't it? All these hidden connections just collapsed." I nodded. Human systems appear invisible until they break. Later that evening, I received an unexpected text from Isabella. "Can we meet tomorrow before the office opens?" When I arrived the next morning, she was already waiting, her usual polished appearance slightly rumpled, suggesting a sleepless night. "I need to tell you something," she began, uncharacteristically hesitant. For a moment, I thought she might confess to the acquisition plan. Instead, she revealed something more personal. "I failed at my last job," she said quietly. "Not officially. My performance reviews were excellent, but I knew I wasn't actually succeeding. Projects completed on time, but teams fell apart afterward. Clients didn't return. I couldn't understand why." She looked up, vulnerability replacing her usual confidence. "When Mom kept talking about your amazing results, I was determined to prove success came from rigid structure, not whatever it is you do. Because if you were right, then your entire approach needed rethinking." I finished for her. She nodded. "Firing you wasn't just about streamlining management. It was about eliminating evidence that contradicted my worldview." The admission stunned me. While not a confession about the acquisition plot, it revealed an essential truth. Isabella had been threatened not just professionally but personally by my methodology. "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "Because yesterday I watched you solve in minutes what would have taken me weeks, if ever, and you didn't even seem to think it was special." This moment of honesty created an opening I hadn't anticipated. I decided to take a calculated risk. "Isabella, I know about the acquisition plan." Her face paled. "The same way I know when a client is about to walk away before they say anything. I pay attention to patterns others miss." For several seconds, she sat frozen, her career and relationship with her mother hanging in the balance. "Does Mom know?" she finally asked. Not yet, and she doesn't need to, depending on what happens next. The implied choice hung between us. Isabella's response surprised me. Instead of denial or defensiveness, she laughed, a short, bitter sound. The irony is, I've been reconsidering whether acquisition is even the right move. What you've shown me these past weeks, it's not replicable through standard corporate integration. Exactly, I said. What makes this company valuable would be destroyed in the process of acquiring it. That morning marked the beginning of an unexpected alliance. Isabella canceled her next 3 calls with her previous employer and spent a full day with me designing an alternative strategy, not for acquisition, but for partnership. When we finally presented to Madeline, we offered not a warning about corporate raiders, but an opportunity for strategic growth. The company that had planned to consume us would instead distribute our methodology through their global network, maintaining our independence while expanding our impact. Madeline studied us both with the shrewd assessment that had built her success. Something has changed between you two. Isabella glanced at me before responding. Let's just say, I've gained perspective on what actually drives business success. The restructured deal tripled the company's valuation within 6 months. My consulting firm expanded to serve clients worldwide, with Isabella eventually joining as a partner, specializing in scaling human-centered methodologies across large organizations. The day she officially resigned from her former employer to join Undercurrent permanently, she handed me a small, wrapped package. Inside was a vintage brooch, a wave-shaped silver piece with inlaid blue stone. For the woman who showed me what flows beneath the surface, the note read. Madeline never learned the full truth about the acquisition attempt. Isabella and I agreed some knowledge serves no purpose except to damage trust that can be rebuilt in better ways. People often ask if I regret not exposing Isabella immediately. I don't. True power isn't found in moments of righteous revelation, but in transforming potential adversaries into allies who truly understand your value. My revenge wasn't firing back at Isabella or embarrassing her to Madeline. My revenge was living well, building something so undeniably effective that even those determined to dismiss it eventually recognized its worth. The greatest victory isn't defeating your opponents. It's having them voluntarily join your cause because they've seen the truth for themselves. If my story resonates with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Share your own experiences in the comments. When has your unique approach been underestimated, and how did you prove its value? I read every comment and would love to connect with others who've transformed dismissal into opportunity. Thank you for listening to my journey from employee to founder, from target to mentor, and from underestimated to undeniable.
はい、そうです。はい。